You lived an entire life before the age of 3. You were born. You opened your eyes to a world of light and shadow. You learned the specific frequency of your mother's voice. You tasted salt, sweet, and bitter. You took your first steps on a planet you didn't understand. You spoke your first words, and you remember none of it, not a single second. Most people assume the answer is simple. Your brain wasn't on yet. You were a blank slate, a biological recorder waiting for the record button to be pressed. But that isn't true. The reality is far stranger and a little more haunting. Your baby brain wasn't failing to record your life. It was recording everything. Your memories were there, but something destroyed them. In 1905, Sigmund Freud gave this black hole a name: infantile amnesia. For a century, we thought babies were just incapable of forming memories, but then the data started coming in. In the 1980s, psychologist Carolyn Rovee-Collier proved that babies are actually learning machines. She tied a silk ribbon from a baby's ankle to a mobile hanging over their crib. The babies quickly realized that a kick meant the mobile danced, and they loved it. When she brought those same babies back days later, they didn't hesitate. They started kicking immediately. Even 2-month-olds could hold that memory for 48 hours. 6-month-olds could remember it for weeks. So, the hardware works. The infant brain can learn, store, and recall. But by the time you reach adulthood, every trace of that ribbon and mobile world is gone. Why? The first part of the answer is structural. Deep in your brain sits a curved ridge called the hippocampus. Think of it as the save button for your life. Its job is to take a raw experience, a conversation, a birthday, a walk in the park, and weave it into a long-term episode you can replay later. In an adult, the hippocampus is a well-oiled machine. But in an infant, the construction crew is still on site. The connections between the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, where we store our files, are still being wired. Key regions like the dentate gyrus aren't fully online until you're nearly 4 years old. Your infant brain could form short-term sticky notes, but it lacked the filing cabinet to keep them forever. But that's only half the story. In 2014, neuroscientists Sheena, Josselyn, and Frankland discovered something that flipped the script. They asked a radical question. What if the very process that builds your brain is also what erases your past? In your first years, your brain is in a state of neurogenesis. It's mass-producing new neurons at a rate you will never experience again. It's an explosion of growth. But there's a cost. As these thousands of new wires force their way into the brain's existing circuits, they disrupt the old ones. They literally overwrite the data that was already there. To prove this, they tested mice. When they sped up brain growth in adult mice, the mice started forgetting. When they slowed down brain growth in baby mice, the babies kept their memories longer. The conclusion is counterintuitive. Your baby memories weren't lost because your brain was weak. They were lost because your brain was too busy growing. To build the person you are today, your brain had to tear down the scaffolding of the person you were yesterday. Then there is the psychological ghost. To have an autobiographical memory, you need a self. You need to be the main character of your own story. But psychologists Mark Howe and Mary Courage found that before the age of 2, there is no you in your head. Before 18 months, if you put a dot of red lipstick on a baby's nose and show them a mirror, they reach out to touch the other baby in the glass. They don't realize it's them. But around age 2, something clicks. They touch their own nose. That moment, the birth of self-recognition, is exactly when long-term memories start to stick. You can't remember being a baby because, for the first 2 years, there was no narrator in the booth to record the story. The final piece of the puzzle is language. Psychologist Catherine Nelson argued that language isn't just how we share memories, it's how we format them. Before you could speak, your world was raw sensory data: the smell of a blanket, the warmth of milk, the blur of a ceiling fan. But without words, that data has no skeleton to hang on. It's like pouring water into a tray without any ice cube molds. It just spills away. This is why your culture actually dictates how far back you can remember. In New Zealand, the Maori culture places a massive emphasis on personal lineage and storytelling. On average, Maori adults can remember back to age 2.5. In East Asian cultures, where early childhood focus is often more collective than individual, First memories often don't start until age 4. The stories your parents told you about yourself literally carved the paths your memory travels today. So what happened to those first 3 years? Your hippocampus wasn't ready to save. Your explosion of new neurons overrode the old circuits. You had no concept of a self to anchor your experiences, and you had no language to give them a shape. It wasn't a failure, it was a transformation. Every human being has a black hole at the start of their story, and it leads to an uncomfortable truth. Look at a photo of yourself as a 1-year-old. Is that you? In a very real biological sense, no. That was a person who lived, felt, and learned, but whose mind was disassembled and rebuilt, neuron by neuron, to create the individual watching this video right now. Your brain didn't forget your infancy. It sacrificed it. It destroyed the baby so that you could exist.